The sun rose over the African horizon, coloring the Serengeti sky bright red as Kiano, a tribal man, stepped out of his simple hut. It seemed like an ordinary morning, or so he thought. Holding a carved wooden cup, his breath made small clouds in the cool morning air. Years of living in tune with the wild had taught him that every day held surprises, but nothing could have prepared him for what was coming. The smell of dry earth and grassland, damp with morning dew, filled the air as Kiano's sharp eyes spotted a shadow moving nearby. It wasn't the wind rustling the trees or clouds passing over the plains. A golden-brown figure with a grand mane approached him. An African lion, the king of animals, a creature of strength and quiet danger. But he wasn't hunting. He moved slowly, carefully, carrying something in his jaws. Kiano's heart raced. Years of following animals and understanding the wild couldn't stop his instinct to run. Yet something in the lion's walk kept him still. Those glowing amber eyes weren't those of a killer. They were eyes of desperation, a father's silent cry for help. The distance shrank, 20 meters, 15 meters, 10 meters. The morning light now lit up the Serengeti, clear enough for Kiano to see what the lion carried. A lion cub, covered in blood and barely moving. A deep cut marked its side, one leg hanging loose and unnatural. Only the slight rise and fall of the cub's chest showed it was still alive. The lion stopped just steps from Kiano's hut. In a timeless moment, their eyes locked, not as enemies, nor as prey and predator, but as two beings standing at the edge of life and death. With a gentleness that surprised him, the lion placed his cub on the packed dirt in front of the hut. The cub gave a weak cry as it touched the cool ground. Then the lion stepped back, his eyes never leaving Kiano. The message was clear, no words needed. Save my child. Kiano's instincts screamed to retreat into the hut, call the elders, or do anything to avoid this dangerous moment. But a stronger, deeper feeling stirred inside him, a kindness that crossed the gap between man and animal. Slowly, keeping his eyes on the lion's steady gaze, Kiano knelt down. The cub's breaths were weak and uneven, its eyes showing pain too deep for words. The cut on the cub's side was bad, torn by the clear marks of teeth, likely from another male lion trying to kill the cub to make the pride's female ready to mate again. A harsh truth of the Serengeti that Kiano knew well. It's okay, Kiano whispered, though he knew it wasn't true. The cub was slipping away fast. Without quick help, it wouldn't survive the hour. With slow, steady hands, he untied his woven cloth, gently wrapping it around the small, shaking cub, and lifted it. The lion let out a deep growl, a sound that chilled Kiano, but he didn't attack. Instead, he moved closer to the hut's edge, sat a few meters from the door, and lay down, a quiet protector. As Kiano stepped back into the hut, holding the fragile cub in his arms, he felt the weight of a moment that would change his life forever. His path and the lives of these wild creatures were now tied together in ways no one could have guessed. The real story was just starting. Inside the small hut, time seemed to drag. Every moment was precious for the weak life in Kiano's arms. He gently placed the cub on a woven mat on a low wooden table. Sunlight came through the hut's small window, shining on the cub's blood-stained golden fur. The deep cut on its side glowed with fresh red and darker dried blood. With steady but trembling hands, Kiano grabbed a worn healing bag from a basket, filled with herbs and cloths handed down by his tribe. Every move was a race against time and fear. The old radio hissed as he turned it on, its noise filling the air. 1 buzz, 2 buzzes, 3. Each second felt like forever. "Nkai, it's me," a deep voice finally answered. As Kiano described the cub's desperate state, its breathing grew weaker. Nkai's instructions were clear and firm, cutting through the panic. Clean the wound, stop the bleeding, keep him warm, give him small sips of water. Simple steps to keep death away. But Kiano knew the cub needed more. "I'll contact Nazirian," Nkai said, his voice turning serious. "She's at the tribal healing camp, about an hour's walk from you. Keep the cub alive until she arrives." 1 hour, 60 endless minutes. Outside, the lion stayed firm in his watch, a silent guard at the Serengeti's edge. Through a small gap in the hut's woven wall, Kiano sometimes caught the lion's gaze, those sharp amber eyes steady, waiting in a strange, quiet watch. In all his years in the Serengeti's wilds, he had never seen anything like this. A top predator trusting a man, the ancient enemy of its kind. Warm honey water dripped from a gourd into the cub's mouth. Its tiny tongue moved slightly, a weak but stubborn sign of its fight to live. Kiano used a hollow reed to add a few more drops, his heartbeat matching each slow swallow of the tiny creature. The sound of footsteps and voices broke the heavy quiet. Nazirian arrived sooner than expected, her small group of healers kicking up clouds of dry dirt as they walked. Through the gap, Kiano saw her stop, eyes wide at the sight of the lion. The moment was unreal, a tribal healer standing less than 10 meters from a wild African lion, with no spear, no wall. The lion raised his head, watching, but stayed still, a loyal guardian. Nazirian moved with the calm of someone who had spent her life caring for the Serengeti's fiercest animals. Each step was slow and careful, her eyes fixed on the lion, her hand never reaching for the spear on her back. "I've heard stories of this," Nazirian whispered as she entered the hut, but never believed it could happen. Her dark eyes widened at the sight, Kiano kneeling beside the fading lion cub. With the skill of an experienced healer, Nazirian opened her woven healing bag, pulling out bone needles, small clay jars of herbal mixtures, and clean cloth strips. Without extra words, she began her work. A thin reed pierced the cub's skin, sending a mix of crushed herbs and water into its weak body. The cub twitched, reacting to the sharp sting. Morina and neem, Nazirian explained, to stop infection and give strength. Her hands moved with amazing skill, stitching the cut with sinew thread, cleaning, and wrapping it with cloth. "Male lion attack, no doubt," she said. "One of nature's cruelest acts, killing cubs to make the female ready to mate again." Kiano glanced through the hut's woven gap at the lion, still standing guard. "He knows we're trying to save his cub," he said. Nazirian nodded slightly, her hands steady. "Maybe. Or maybe he has no other choice. But he chose you, Kiano. Of all the people in this land, he brought his cub to you." The sun sank low, painting the Serengeti sky bright red. The hut glowed with the warm orange of evening, casting long shadows of the two humans and the tiny creature fighting to live. Nazirian had done all she could. Now they could only wait. "Tonight we'll decide," she said, packing her tools. "If he makes it through the night, he might have a chance." Kiano looked at the cub, so small in the woven nest he'd made. Its breathing was still quick and shallow, but steadier. The cub's tiny amber eyes opened briefly, looking faintly into an unfamiliar world. As Nazirian and her group left into the evening, darkness covered the Serengeti. Kiano lit a small fire, its warm yellow light creating a safe spot in the African night. The lion stayed outside, his eyes catching the firelight like two glowing sparks in the dark. The long night went on, filled with the cub's faint breaths and the steady hum of crickets outside the hut. Kiano didn't sleep, his hand gently touching the cub's small body, checking for warmth and the faint beat of its heart. Each hour felt like a lifetime. Every wiggle or soft sound from the cub made Kiano tense, fearing it might be its last. As the first rays of morning light slipped through the hut's woven wall, the cub was still alive. Not just alive, but stronger. Its eyes opened clearer, blinking slightly when Kiano gently stroked its head. A warm feeling grew in his chest. Not a sense of winning, but awe at the strong will to live in this tiny creature. Outside, the lion stood, his muscles tight and alert, as if he felt the change. Kiano carefully opened the hut's woven door, trying not to wake the sleeping cub. His eyes met the lion's again, man and animal, joined by something deeper than instinct, beyond understanding. "He's still alive," Kiano said, his voice rough from no sleep and strong feelings. "And I think he'll make it." The lion stared at him, still as a golden statue under the Serengeti dawn. Then, in a moment Kiano would never forget, the lion slowly blinked, a silent nod, a quiet thank you. The fight for life wasn't over, but in that moment, under the glowing Tanzanian sky, Kiano knew they had survived the longest night, and it was just the start. 3 days passed like a blurry dream. 3 days of herbal mixtures dripped through a reed, honey water fed drop by drop, sleepless nights by the flickering firelight. 3 days when the lion never went far from the hut's edge, sometimes slipping into the dark, only to return with a small antelope, proof of quick hunts between his watchful duty. 3 days when Kiano's world shrank to the space between his sleeping mat and the table where the lion cub was slowly healing. The 4th morning brought a small change. While Kiano rewrapped the cub's wound with fresh cloth, he noticed something different. No longer just accepting care, the cub stirred, showing slight resistance, its amber eyes now sharp and watchful. When his hand brushed the injured side, a low growl came out, not a cry of pain but a warning. The return of wild instinct. A sign not just of healing but of a bold spirit, the kind every predator needs to survive the tough Serengeti. The cut was still serious. Nazirian came daily, bringing herbal pastes and her deep wisdom. This morning her face was serious as she studied the cub. An X-ray was needed, she said, worried about a broken bone in the cub's side. A lion that cannot hunt cannot live in the wild. A creature born for open plains, doomed to a limited life in a fenced area. The nearest clinic with an X-ray was at the tribal outpost, a rough 2-hour trip over bumpy, dusty paths. And there was another problem, the lion. How to explain to a wild animal that his cub needed to be taken away for its best chance to live? As if sensing Kiano's thoughts, the lion stood from his watch, his sharp eyes following every move through the hut's woven wall. Sunlight streamed through the hut's woven gaps, lighting up the cub's golden fur, highlighting the faint, growing pattern of its mane. A royal armor shaped over millions of years to create the king of the Serengeti. With the woven transport basket ready, facing the lion felt heavy with unspoken feelings, Kiano's heart pounding as he stepped outside the hut. The lion stood quickly, his muscles moving under his golden, sunlit mane. Not words, but tone and purpose spoke to the wild. In that moment, Kiano felt he stood at the edge of something beyond human understanding. A quiet connection between species, a bond deeper than words. The lion's steady amber eyes seemed to judge every move. When the woven basket appeared, the lion stood tall, tense, but showed no sign of attack. The cub's weak cries sounded as it was lifted from the woven mat that had been its safe place. Each step toward the waiting ox cart was heavy with worry. The lion followed, never more than 3 meters from the humans. As the basket was placed on the cart, the lion stopped, head high, ears alert, every sense sharp. No promise could cross the gap between their worlds, only trust, fragile and valuable. The trip to the tribal outpost was a rough journey of choking dust and jolting bumps. Each shake of the ox cart brought worry about the cub's wounds. Years in the Serengeti had never shown anything as amazing as this. A lion trusting humans with his only cub. At the tribal outpost's clinic, a serious mood hung in the air. Careful, skilled movements, the hum of a portable X-ray machine, the steady beep of monitoring tools. In the shaded waiting area, each minute felt like an hour. A broken bone in the cub's side, but fixable, a small brace and a long recovery, but hope for full healing. The surgery lasted 2 hours. 2 hours of pacing, unable to eat, unable to think of anything but the tiny cub on the healing table and the lion waiting back at the hut in the Serengeti. When it was over, the cub lay in a woven recovery basket, still sleepy from the herbal sedatives, a small brace holding its injured side. One night of watching at the outpost was needed. Kiano walked back to the hut alone, feeling strangely empty, unsure if the lion would still be waiting in the Serengeti. As Kiano returned, the Serengeti sunset painted the sky red, creating a glow so magical it touched the heart. How had the lion chosen him? Why this hut among all the homes across the plains? Maybe he had watched for days, judging Kiano's character like a predator studies its prey. Or maybe it was just desperation, a last hope by a father trying to save his only cub. Reaching the hut, darkness had covered the Serengeti. The ground outside was empty. No sign of the lion. A soft call faded into the vast night air. No answer, no shape moving in the shadows. All that night, by the woven wall, under the starry Tanzanian sky, Kiano's weight grew hopeless. The lion did not return. The next morning, Kiano walked back to the outpost, his heart heavy. The cub was awake, its eyes brighter, responding more strongly to people. A careful night by the healing team ensured no fever after surgery, and the cub ate small bits of mashed meat from a hollow reed. A true fighter, the cub seemed as they moved it into the woven transport basket. With careful care, there was hope for full recovery. On the way back to the hut, thoughts of the lion stayed with Kiano. Had he grown impatient and gone to find his cub, or had he accepted its loss, returning to the lonely life of a wild king? As the ox cart rolled into the clearing, the lion's absence was clear. An empty feeling settled in Kiano's chest. But as he opened the basket inside the hut, placing the cub on the familiar woven mat, a deeper understanding grew. The lion hadn't abandoned his cub. He had trusted Kiano, an act of deep faith. Maybe instinct told him that with such an injury, the cub couldn't return to the wild right away. Maybe he knew the only chance for his cub's survival was with this man who didn't turn away when he asked for help. The days after found a new rhythm. Kiano's daily tasks, tending the hut and making tools, happened beside the woven mat where the cub, now moving, began to explore the hut from its warm nest. Daily talks with Nazarian and Enkai, fresh wraps for the wound, meals of mashed meat. Each night, the hut's door was left slightly open, though Kiano knew the lion wouldn't return. It wasn't pointless hope, but respect for the choice of a creature who had trusted human hands. In the second week, the cub began to stand firmly on all four legs. Its first steps, wobbly and unsure, showed a strong will to live. The first small roar came when the cub saw a bird through the hut's woven gap, its hunting instinct waking. Word spread among the Serengeti's tribes about the man raising a lion cub. They came first with doubt, then curiosity, and finally respect. The story of the lion who trusted a human with his cub spread through the villages, told around campfires. Wildlife trackers came too, with cameras and questions. No explanation could fully make sense of it. This wasn't normal lion behavior, they said, a rare, amazing break from the wild's rules. As the third month passed, the cub, now named Jabari, meaning brave in Swahili, had grown into a strong and beautiful creature. The wound had healed completely, leaving a small scar and a slight limp when he ran. But that didn't weaken his spirit. From a weak patient, Jabari had become a lively presence in the hut, full of curiosity and energy. The time came to make a tough choice. Jabari couldn't stay in the hut forever. He needed space, a place that fit his wild nature. Nazarian and Enkai had found a protected area in the Serengeti where Jabari could grow in a half-wild place, neither fully free nor caged. The morning of goodbye was emotional. The ox cart from the protected area waited outside the hut for its special passenger. Jabari, now sensing change, paced restlessly inside, his amber eyes sharp with alertness. A final moment by the woven mat that had been his safe place in those first days. A last gentle touch behind his ears, where he still liked it best. This bond couldn't be put into words, a connection formed in moments between life and death. As Jabari was led to the cart, a golden shadow flashed at the edge of Kiano's vision. Brief but clear. The lion had returned, watching from a distance, seeing his cub begin a new chapter of life. No one else saw him. No one else heard the soft whisper of the Serengeti breeze carrying the scent of a wild king. For Kiano, it was the final sign, a silent thank you. The ox cart moved away, taking Jabari to his new home. As the Serengeti dust settled, Kiano stood alone outside the hut, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the lion had vanished. One chapter ended, another began. But the lessons from this amazing encounter would last forever. The deep connection between species, kindness that breaks all barriers, and the incredible power of trust. In the Serengeti's wilds, where survival is often harsh and unforgiving, a lion chose to trust human hands. And in that choice, he showed that sometimes nature asks humans for help, and all we can do is answer with our whole heart.